From using every trick in the book to making up new ones on the spot, fighters will go to absolutely insane lengths to gain an advantage. You won't believe some of the things they've tried to push the limits of fair play, legality, and common sense. Buckle up, because here are 10 crazy things fighters tried to gain an advantage, and let me tell you, it's a ride full of mind-blowing absurdity. Number 10. The oily slipstream. Imagine walking into the biggest fight of your life. You're about to face off with one of the greatest in the sport, Kazushi Sakuraba, and your body feels like a slip and slide. Sounds like a disaster waiting to happen, right? Well, Yoshihiro Akiyama was a man on a mission, and his mission was not to be held back by friction. Right before his fight in Japan, Akiyama's corner lathered him up in 6 bottles of Olay Quench lotion, rubbing it into his body like it was an exfoliating treatment. Why? To address his hyperhidrosis, of course, a condition that makes him sweat buckets and leaves his skin like a desert in need of moisture. The problem? He wasn't just treating his dry skin. As his opponent, Sakuraba, struggled to grab onto Akiyama in the fight, the slippery sensation led him to plead with the referee. Akiyama went on to win by TKO, but the aftermath? K1 stepped in, calling the fight a no contest and suspending Akiyama indefinitely. Sometimes, trying to stay smooth really does make things slippery. Number 9. Spy games. If you thought espionage was something out of Mission Impossible, think again. In MMA, it's just another Tuesday. Fighters have been accused of spying on each other's camps for years, sneaking a peek at game plans, secret injuries, or training techniques. But when it goes public, it gets weird. Take Rampage Jackson, for example. Before his bout with John Jones, Rampage became suspicious that Jones had spies in his camp. So what did he do? He faked an injury to throw off his spy. He calls it a level of intelligence the world just didn't understand. And then there's Jose Aldo, who straight up admitted it. Aldo had spies watching Frankie Edgar train for UFC 200. He wasn't even subtle about it. He'd hold back on his kicks, on his left hand, just so Edgar wouldn't catch on. Who needs game plans when you've got eyes everywhere? Number 8. Frame data IRL. Video games meet real-life combat. George St. Pierre, the legend, decided that analyzing frame data, that's right, the same nerdy stuff used to figure out which fighting game move is the fastest, was his ticket to the top. He hired someone to measure the recovery frames of his opponents in real fights. Imagine this, real-life combat, dissected like Super Smash Bros. GSP and his camp would analyze every move, every possible opening, to create battle plans. It's the ultimate blend of nerd and fighter, a real-life fighting algorithm. High-level stuff? Absolutely, but it's a far cry from those old-school brawlers who go in and just wing it. Number 7. The yes man. You know that feeling when you're trying to psych yourself up before a big moment? Now imagine pumping yourself up so hard, you become a one-man motivational chant. Enter Diego Sanchez. In the mid-2000s, Sanchez became obsessed with Tony Robbins' self-help book Unlimited Power. This wasn't just some pep talk. Sanchez took it to the extreme, chanting YES over and over. He'd firewalk, he'd scream, he'd jump. All in the name of psyching himself up. For a while, he thought it was his secret weapon. Whether it worked or not is up for debate, but one thing is for sure. Sanchez would walk into that cage like a man possessed, and as wild as it was, Diego's yes. Yeah, chant became one of the most iconic and bizarre in MMA history. Number 6. Lion's Den Madness. There are gyms, then there's Ken Shamrock's Lion's Den. Here, fighters would endure a brutal gauntlet of insane workouts, hundreds of squats, bear crawls up hills, endless pull-ups, and then sparring for hours with fresh pros who beat the living daylights out of them. It was a cult-like atmosphere where the goal wasn't just to train, it was to break you. And then, just for fun, Shamrock and his brother Frank would wake up recruits in the middle of the night, telling them they were about to be killed. But it wasn't just mind games. Oh no, Frank Shamrock would choke out fighters unexpectedly, and then, just in case they didn't get the lesson, one night they woke up with a shotgun in their face. This, my friends, was the Lion's Den. You either survived or you got crushed. And somehow, this mental and physical terror led to some of the most hardened fighters in history. But it didn't come without its scars. Number 5. Fasting against demons. What do you do when you want to get closer to God and fend off demons before a big fight? If you're Rampage Jackson, you fast. And by fast, I mean no food for 3 days. Rampage had a spiritual epiphany just before his fight with Wanderlei Silva for the Pride middleweight belt. He felt that fasting would purify him and protect him from evil forces. But instead of feeling spiritually invincible, Rampage found himself physically exhausted. By the time he stepped into the cage, his body was on empty, and he got knocked out in the second round. fasting might have warded off demons, but it certainly didn't help him against Silva's fists. Number 4. Can't hurt Tony. Tony Ferguson is already a crazy person. His training methods have long been the stuff of legends, but in the depths of a losing streak, Tony decided that he needed to go even further down the rabbit hole. Enter David Goggins. If you're unfamiliar, Goggins is the Navy SEAL ultramarathoner who runs insane distances with his hands tied. Ferguson hired him to push his physical limits even further. Goggins worked Ferguson until he was broken, convinced that this kind of madness would get him back on track. But instead of a breakthrough, Ferguson hit a brick wall, losing a unanimous decision to Paddy Pimblett. What was the lesson here? Some fighters thrive on discipline. Some need a touch of madness, but even Tony Ferguson could only push his body so far before the reality of his training turned him into a cautionary tale. Number 3. Prank calling a Gracie. It's 1995. Renzo Gracie, the world-renowned Brazilian jiu-jitsu master, is at the World Combat Championship 1, ready to face off against a judo Olympian named Ben Spakers, who really just looked like a guy who should have been sitting behind a desk. Spakers, thinking he could rattle the legend, decided to take the low road, prank call Gracie's hotel room all night, but the prank calls didn't stop there. Ben also threw some weird trash talk at Renzo about his girlfriend's eyes at the press conference. Bad idea. Renzo destroyed him. He choked him out, and then, after the referee stepped in, Renzo kicked Spakers in the head just for good measure. Spakers thought he could mess with a Gracie's head, but all it got him was a one-way ticket to an embarrassing loss. Messing with a Gracie? Big mistake. Number 2. Chamber of Solitude. Some fighters do the usual stuff to get in fight shape. Yuri Prohaska? He does this. Prohaska doesn't just train, he isolates himself in dark rooms for 3 days, fasting, barely drinking. He punches trees, shadows box on ice, and even mimics the movement of zebras with a specialized coach, all to channel some mystical energy that he believes will make him unstoppable. It sounds ridiculous, and it probably is, but guess what? It works, somehow. In an age of ultra science, this guy is finding ways to harness his mind, body, and spirit in ways that border on insanity. But when he's in the cage, the results speak for themselves. So, whether it's the weird rituals or the Zen-like training, Prohaska is playing a different game altogether. Number 1. The Cursed Painting. And then there's Jason DeLucia, the man who fought Boss Rutten and believed he could beat him, not with his fists, but with witchcraft. DeLucia, feeling the pressure of his 2 losses to Rutten, decided he'd create a cursed painting of his rival, then ask Rutten to add a drop of his blood to it. Why? To hex Rutten before their 3rd bout. At least, that's how the legend goes. But DeLucia himself later revealed that the curse wasn't for Rutten. It was actually a ritual to help Frank Shamrock, who was fighting Rutten on the same night. Shamrock went on to win, and the painting supposedly worked. Sort of. Whatever the truth, Jason DeLucia went down in MMA history as the guy who thought fighting was just as much about magic as it was about might.